Hey guys, I'm Kevin Davis from kevinstrek.com. Today, I'm pretty excited about the interview that we're doing here today. This is with my buddy Rick Kaselj.
And it works out being good because it ends up helping everyone. I mean, who doesn't want to, like, being in the fitness industry, doesn't want to help people reach their goal? And then sometimes a fitness goal, sometimes what's going to hold them back or get in their way of reaching a fitness goal is pain. And if we can help them, around that pain, what's wrong with that? Because a good chunk of our clients will stop training with us because of pain.
For sure. I mean, like I was telling you, I've got. Well, I mean, I can think of at least a half a dozen people just in my, business, in my in-person training business in my gym. There, I can think of at least a half a dozen people that I'm gonna start to implement some of what we're talking about here right off the bat. So, I mean, definitely some great sharing that we've got here.
Yeah.
So, something else I was wondering about: is there a point where this has gone too far? I mean, for us to be able to help, us as trainers to be able to help or to be able to use these methods or this way of thinking, is there a point where it's gone too far and you do need to go seek, help with a doctor or sports medicine? And when is that?
Okay, so what happens now, this is how it works with this internet world. You get a pain, so you go on the internet and you try to figure out what you got.
Yep.
Sometimes you can figure out what you got. Okay, by reading forums and things and stuff and figuring out what you got. But what the next step, what ends up happening is you think you think you have this, and then you start kind of doubting. I might have. Well, maybe I don't have this. I actually have this. In order to, if you get to that point where you have a clear idea of what you have, and things are still bothering you, that's when I say go get some help. Get someone to look at it over again, give you a second opinion, give you clear idea of what's going on, and then you can go from there. Because just having that confirmation from someone else saying, it's this and it's not so bad, eases a lot of stress from yourself, gives you a lot of clarity, and then it allows you to focus on what you need to do. Now, the part that a lot of people forget is, we end up being the best person that can end up fixing ourselves. Yes, we can go to people that will provide clarification, confirmation, and direction, but ideally, we are the person that is our greatest therapist, greatest doctor in fixing ourselves. Because even if what ends up happening, worst case scenario, you end up having surgery, well, it's up to you to prepare yourself for surgery, right? Because the better you prepare yourself for surgery, the faster your recovery, and there's exhaustive amounts of research that show that. And what we're seeing here in the Vancouver area is a lot of doctors are refusing or delaying knee joint replacement. And this has nothing to do with the shoulder, but it relates to this story, is they're delaying knee joint replacement surgery because the person needs to lose 50 or 100 pounds before they can give them a knee replacement. So if they give them a knee replacement right now, what's going to happen is they're going to wear out the knee replacement a lot faster, or the surgery is going to fail because they're progressively increasing, getting heavier and are less fit and are losing more muscle mass. So they might need a joint replacement, but the joint replacement is going to fail, or it's going to end up wearing out. So the same thing ends up happening with the shoulder. If you end up having worst case scenario and it ends up leading or needing surgery, you're going to need to work on it prior to, and you're going to have to work on it afterwards. So that's kind of where that's where my angle comes from. If you have an idea of what it is, if you end up having that doubt and confirmation of what it is, go get someone to give you a second opinion, give you a clear idea of what you end up having and what you should focus in on. But remember that we are probably the ones that can fix ourselves the best.
And so that's a great point. I mean, with some, sorry. So that's a great point. Even with, even if you do find that you need to go seek some help, it's still using some of what we're talking about here, using these methods of improving and repairing and kind of bringing that, we're talking about the shoulder here today, bringing that shoulder joint back to how it should be in the musculature, balanced back out, and same thing with the space in the joint, can still be part of how you're going to repair it, even after you have seen the doctor or the therapist or whoever you need.
I mean, exactly. Like it. I don't know. There's not much more.
Not much more on that.
Not much more I can add. I can rant more, but that's I mean, the philosophy of someone will fix me,
yeah,
is not very effective compared to I'm going to fix myself. And fixing yourself ends up helping. Yeah, you might need some guidance, confirmation, pointing in the right direction, but ultimately, I mean, it's up to us.
And that's really, I mean, that's great, because that's kind of my belief as well, and part of what I try to talk about on here is how to thrive, how to really be able to get the most out of your body and out of your life, and that's exactly what you're saying. If you can enjoy your life better by maintaining and taking care of your own shoulder, then that's perfectly aligned with my philosophy as well. So,
yeah.
Are there any? I did have a question regarding, because I get this question all the time, glucosamine, or some of the various dietary changes and supplement changes that you can use for joint pain. Have you seen any advantage to that, or does it not really have much value?
I mean, I can't say that I'm like an expert when it comes to the nutrition side of things, but this is what I've ended up. This is kind of my thoughts on it, and this is how I end up relaying it to people. Now, if I don't a lot of times, why we're taking the supplements is a lot of times we're trying to address some sort of inflammation. Mm-hmm. And if we don't, or if we're not trying to address that inflammation, we're trying to hopefully regenerate something, cartilage, whatnot. Well, right. There's not going to be any regeneration happening if there's inflammation. So we need to kind of address that inflammation. Now, how we can end up doing that dietary-wise would end up being, trying to, number one ends up being hydration. So if we can try to hydrate as much as we can and keep our bodies in balance when it comes to water intake, that ends up taking us a big step forward when it comes to inflammation and helping with our recovery. The second thing would be, trying to avoid foods that end up inflaming the body or leading to inflammation and inhibiting that recovery process. And things that would end up doing that, a lot of times it ends up being excess processed foods. Yep. It could and seeing if you are sensitive to any specific foods. And that could end up being like gluten. That could end up being like soy. That can end up being like dairy. And you'll need to experiment on yourself to see how things are. Like, how do you feel if for one day or 2 or 3 days you remove gluten from your diet, or if you really like soy, if you remove it from your diet for 2 or 3 days, how do you end up feeling? Or what if you remove dairy from your diet for 2 or 3 days and seeing how you end up feeling? If I end up taking care of those two things, then I can add the third thing, which ends up being some sort of supplementation, which has some evidence or doesn't have some evidence to help out. So that's the approach that I end up taking, because if a lot of people will go for the pill and look for the fix for the pill, but if I'm taking in inflammatory foods or I'm not hydrated, the pill doesn't matter. If I am doing things that end up inflaming the joint, the pill doesn't matter. So I need to look at those other things and make sure those other things are in line. Then I can try supplementation. So that ends up being my thought on the whole process. I think it helps and it plays a key. But if I don't have those other ducks in a row, the supplementation doesn't matter.
It's kind of like that mentality that we see a lot in our society anyway. The quick fix. You said it. Quick fix is what we're looking for. And that's not always the answer. There are things that, like what we've been talking about throughout this whole conversation, things that you can do that are going to actually fix or help with the problem, rather than just masking the symptoms and some magic pill that fixes it today, kind of thing. It takes months or maybe years, maybe your whole life to develop that imbalance. So now you need to take the time to correct it properly. So, even with some good programming, if we're doing what should be a safe and effective workout, there's a lot of different things, different factors as far as changes in stress levels in other part of our lives. Like you mentioned right there, inflammation, dietary changes, things like that, that can end up causing us to have imbalances and shoulder pain. So do you have any tips for assessing these imbalances and weaknesses, aside from the one test that we've already talked about, in order to avoid knowing when we're overworking the shoulder? Because that sometimes comes in, if we're doing a lot of super heavy bench pressing and shoulder pressing and doing 5 different kinds of each of those exercises on the same day and that sort of thing. So would there be any tips that you've got for avoiding, or I guess maybe assessing if we are overworking the shoulder?
Okay, I mean, there would end up being 2 ways that I would end up kind of approaching that. I call it cooking the rotator cuff. It's not a good thing, because the rotator cuff provides protection of the shoulder joint, and if you cook it, meaning you fatigue it or overwork it, well, it can't do its job, so you end up having more stress on the joint, which is a negative thing that we don't want. So you don't want to cook the rotator cuff, meaning doing the rotator cuff exercise you find on the internet, high repetitions prior to your workout, probably not a good idea. The second thing I would end up doing is, if someone kind of palpates, so if I find the outer part of my shoulder and to the middle a little bit, so you got the middle or to the front just a little bit, and if I kind of palpate through there, that will give you that. What that ends up doing is, if it's very, very, it'll give you an idea if you have sensitivity in the rotator cuff. So, supraspinatus, which ends up being one of the rotator cuff muscles, the most common that ends up being injured, you can end up palpating it there. And if you end up having sensitivity, that ends up giving you an idea that it's been overworked, or you've worked it too much. So that would end up being now, it's not a perfect test, but it'll give you an idea of, if I end up palpating it a lot, or palpating it and it feels very sensitive, it's kind of a good cue that I've done a little too much for my shoulders. And then the third thing would end up being is, if I end up taking a ball, you can find out whatever density you want. So you can go from like a racquetball all the way to like a golf ball. Mm-hmm. And if I end up self-massaging those muscles around the shoulder blade, if I end up having high sensitivity, it's probably a good chance that you end up really working your shoulder muscle.
Okay, great. Yeah, that'd be definitely I think of a few people that would certainly help out. I had one more thing that I definitely wanted to get to with you here. I've been working with someone who's got some joint weaknesses, and he's actually had some osteoarthritis, and so there's been kind of definitely some loss of space in the joints, and that's actually in several different joints, not the shoulder only. But we've found lately here that his shoulders are becoming a hindrance to some of the other exercises that it works with. And so, he was definitely, I was talking to him about how I was going to talk to you about some shoulder pain, and he's like, man, ask him if there's anything that I can do that'll help get back some of the strength, get back that movement, because it's more, not being able to lift through the full range of motion overhead and that sort of thing. But then it comes into play even on exercises like the bench press, and really any pressing movement, not only the vertical pressing. So, do you have any tips for people who are having issues like that, where they're starting to see the shoulder cause weakening in other movements? Where to start, really, I guess, is kind of what he was asking.
A lot of times what I find is, if there ends up being pain within the shoulder, the first muscle group that ends up not working properly ends up being the scapular muscles. So I will oftentimes end up targeting them. Okay. And the most basic way of ending up doing that is, if I end up having like resistance bands, straight arm out in front of me, and I separate the arms and I try to focus on the muscles in my shoulder blades doing that work, holding that resistance apart. And then if I separate the arms as far as I can, trying to focus on those scapular muscles doing the work so I can help fire them or wake them up. And then I would end up, just doing that touch below shoulder height, and then I can go angles. And that's what I would end up starting off with, just kind of targeting those scapular muscles. And then I would end up, arms straight, building that tension in that scapular area, and then getting them to lift the tubing and the hands overhead and really working those scapular muscles. Now, when I work on those scapular muscles, I will end up doing them near the end of my workout as opposed to at the beginning of my workout. Once again, that rotator cuff cooking. If I also cook the scapular stabilizers, those shoulder blade muscles, then they can't do their job of like protecting that shoulder. Other things that would end up helping is, prior to doing like shoulder exercises or your shoulder workout, if you end up doing stuff that'll wake up or prime up those scapular muscles, and a lot of times if you're doing pressing movements, doing like low-level push-ups will end up helping. You're just priming those scapular muscles. You just end up waking up those scapular muscles, and they're very active with push-up movements. So it could be full push-up movements from the toes, from the knees, or from the walls, from the wall, the hands on the wall, just to prime up those scapular muscles, wake them up, but not overworking them, and then get into what your workout is for that day.
For the day, yeah.
Yeah.
Great, excellent. Is there anything that you think that we didn't cover here, or things that are going to be great value? I think we've gotten, from my standpoint, I've seen a ton of value in what we've talked about already. But is there anything else that you think?
Yeah, I think we've really covered a very broad. We kind of have covered a lot of it. We're looking at trying to think that what we've done is kind of reshape the shoulder negatively. We need to reshape it positively. One of those ways of reshaping the shoulder from the inside is that vertical hanging exercise, and I kind of showed you how you can see if it works, and I suggest that you end up trying that one. The couple test on seeing if you've overdone it on your shoulder, I think would be very helpful for people. And then talking about those scapular muscles, that ends up being a key thing. Targeting them with specific exercises, but I also find that priming of them ends up helping as well. Just kind of waking them up ends up helping out. And really the understanding that, we might get help. We might get confirmation of what's going on, or be provided what's exactly going on. We might get pointed in the right direction, but ultimately it's up to us to fix ourselves. So I think that ends up being a big point.
That's a huge point right there. With all that we've learned here today, hopefully that's going to be a great help to people. If they find that they want to get some more information and more resources from you, I know I've mentioned already, exerciseforoinjuries.com is where they can find you. How about, continuing on with specifically the shoulder pain, where should they look for you with that?
So exactly. If people just want to go over to exercisesforoinjuries.com, there's tons of articles and videos and audios when it comes to a variety of injuries, and also including shoulder injuries. So it's a resource. You can take a look at it. And then when it comes to like specific, people want more information about what I've ended up talking about. There ends up being, Fix My Shoulder Pain, which is something that I've ended up putting out that kind of puts together all the stuff that I've ended up talking about. So people can refer to that resource. And I think you'll have a link to it underneath this video so people can check it out. And then if people want more information when it comes to those scapular exercises side of things, if you head over to Exercises for Injuries, I have something called Scapular Exercise Program, and that is kind of a program that targets those scapular exercises. So, that's where people can get more information about myself and more resources when it comes to shoulder injuries and shoulder pain.
Great. And like Rick mentioned there, guys, if you look down below here, I'm going to put links for Exercises for Injuries. I'm going to put links for the specific things that we've talked about here today. That way you guys can hook up with Rick. As I told you before, he's a great resource, and he's got the email newsletter that you can sign up for free. That is a fantastic resource that I use all the time. So, other than that, Rick, thanks for hanging out with us today, man. It's been great, and I think it's going to help out a lot of people with some of the information that you've given. So thanks for hanging out. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
If people have any questions, they can leave them down below, and I'll definitely come by and answer them. So, thank you very much for your time, and thank you, everyone, for kind of watching and listening.
All right, thanks.